Some of the best lessons that I've run have been where a machine learning model did the wrong thing. Students learn a lot from seeing an example of machine learning not doing what we want. Perhaps my favourite example of this was a lesson that I did based on rock, paper, scissors. Students were making a Scratch project to play rock, paper, scissors. They used the webcam to collect example photos of their hand, making the shapes of rock, paper, and scissors. They used these photos to train a machine learning model that could recognise their hand shapes. Now, in this particular lesson, the project was working really nicely for nearly all of the students, but there was one student where things went a bit wrong. This student had collected a decent set of training photos of their hand in a rock shape, and they had a good set of training photos of their hands making the scissors shape. But while they were taking their training photos of their hand in the paper shape, one of their friends in the class had come over to chat to them. Their friend was stood next to them while they were taking nearly all of their paper training photos, and because of the way their webcam was angled, their friend was visible in nearly all of the paper training photos. None of us thought anything of this at first, none of us spotted it, but their machine learning model learned that a photo of a hand meant rock or scissors depending on the hand shape, but the model had learned that a photo of a hand and a person meant paper. We only noticed this when the students started playing rock, paper, scissors against the computer. Whenever the teacher or I came to see how they were getting on, whenever we were stood next to them, their machine learning model reported that they were doing paper, no matter what hand shape they were making. So they would have their hand in a rock shape. If we stood next to them, the machine learning model would report that they were doing paper. If we stepped to the side, if we stepped away, it would correctly recognize that he was doing rock. It took us a while to work out what was going on, but when we eventually spotted what had happened, this became a fantastic, even if unplanned, lesson for the class. I think they learnt more from that one student's project than anything that I'd planned for the lesson. Because seeing things go wrong is such a useful experience for students, I don't always rely on it to happen in this sort of unplanned way. Sometimes I have to resort to planting a trap if there's something I want the students to see happen. For example, in one lesson, I was helping students train a machine learning model to recognise if a photo shows an apple or a tomato. Now, I told them that I was going to save them some time by pointing them at where they could find some images to use for training. Now, you might be able to tell where I'm going with this from the screenshot. I'd pointed them at photos of green apples and red tomatoes. So they used these to train a machine learning model. And again, I said I was going to help them test it in Scratch. I'd give them a set of test photos, and I wanted them to get the machine learning model to sort them into two groups, apples and tomatoes. But I gave them a bunch of photos with red apples and unripe green tomatoes. Predictably, their machine learning models made many mistakes. Their models had learned that red objects are normally tomatoes and green objects are normally apples, because that's what they taught it. But it isn't always true. Now, this one was a bit contrived, but it was still a useful project because it got the students thinking about how things can go wrong and the kinds of things we can do to try and avoid it. Machine learning models learn from patterns in the training data we give them, whether or not those are patterns we'd intended it to learn.